But listen, let's get to this misinformation story from WCCF Tech. And of course, in the picture, it has the Xbox Series X and the black edition of the PlayStation 5 Pro. It says gaming. Xbox Next, the Xbox Next may cost twice as much as the PlayStation 6 due to the Magnus APU and third-party store support. And in this tweet, ladies and gentlemen, from, again, the official WCCF Tech Twitter account, it says, the Xbox Next Generation system could cost significantly more than the PlayStation 6 due to the Magnus APU and the potential of support of third-party stores that would deprive Microsoft of the 30% cut on every game sold on the system. Oh no, doom and gloom, ladies and gentlemen. Look out. Misinformation by the press, but no one looks at this as misinformation. Everyone's probably, who's a Sony fan, applauding this. Look, folks, let's be real for a second, okay? Sony PlayStation is the most popular brand, and we know that because it's number 7 in the most recognizable brands in the top 10. They didn't get there by accident. Sony has been doing this consistently since the PlayStation 1. Now, whether you agree or you don't, that's fine, but I'm going to give credit where credit is due. The casual audience, which equates for about 85% buy PlayStations. The hardcore, which I'm giving extra credit to, equates to about 15%. It's probably less than, I would even dare say, half of that. I'd probably say about 8% of the populace are the hardcore, right? But the majority, 88%, 89%, and 92% maybe, are casuals. And it's the most popular box. That's why people buy it. Well, folks, let's keep it a buck, as the kids like to say. If the PlayStation 5 Pro and their other consoles just saw a $50 increase in 2025, how does anyone with a brain that is secured correctly in your head think that this next box, the PlayStation 6, the Pro, or the Handheld, whatever of the 3 SKUs is going to come out in potentially 27 or even 2028, is going to cost $500? If you do think that, then I have a bridge to sell you. Just give me your bank account number and send that money on over. I'll send the bridge over immediately through FedEx, because that is not what's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen. So this story is ridiculous on itself. Yes. Is the next Xbox going to cost probably $900? Yeah, I would imagine it could be. And the reason why that is because both or all of these companies, I say both, all of these companies are no longer, Umbra, taking losses up front for hardware. Those days are done. The days of PlayStation potentially losing upwards of $200 per console, or Xbox losing maybe $200 per console, those days are gone. The people like us who want to play these new systems are going to pay. They're all going to be $800, $900, maybe even $1,000. Right now, this is why I like the approach of the way Xbox is doing it, because if they do go the OEM way, and the OEM is meaning that you're going to get a console that is an Xbox that says Xbox on it, but it's going to have another logo, whether that be Lenovo, whether that be Alienware, Asus, Dell. Pick your favorite company. That company might be on the next Xbox because it's going to be an OEM device. And those OEM devices, Umbra, are potentially launching next year. And I again, I don't have this on confirmed authority, but it just makes sense. They have a partnership with Asus, who has a pair of consoles coming out next month. I would imagine that the first OEM device that is going to rock a Xbox logo that's not made by Microsoft is probably going to be Asus, and that is coming next year. That box could potentially be $600, $700, $800, I'm thinking $900, because it's going to be a monster machine. And the more powerful these consoles get, the more expensive they're going to get. So again, just going back to the story, I find it to be reckless at best to even suggest that the next Xbox is going to potentially cost twice as much as the PlayStation 6. So if the PlayStation 5 Pro is nearly $800 after tax, what do you think the PlayStation 6 is going to be? $500? Come on, folks. Grow up and stop with the nonsense. This is a ridiculous story. And again, people in the chat that said we were spreading misinformation, and I don't want to single out anybody, so I say people as everybody under the umbrella. Come on. If there's any misinformation being spread, it's right there in front of you by not podcasters, a professional journalist. But let's get your thoughts on this, man.
So the thought that, and I keep saying this, and it's, to me, I said this way back when we saw the Pro price. When the Pro was $700 announced initially, it was like, well, next gen is going to be at least $700 starting, right? I don't think that Sony is looking to subsidize that cost. Microsoft has already come out saying they won't. So what then do we have? 700 and up that we have to be looking for. The handheld devices that you spoke of a second ago, we're already seeing supposed pricing of $899, $99, $900, right, for the ROG Ally X. To think that right there, even with a Z2 Extreme, is going to be more costly than the next Xbox, I think it's a pipe dream. I think people are going to have to start. If anything, I would suggest anybody in the chat or anyone hearing this voice of mine, you would start putting some money aside right now. Get past that myth of, well, typically it's $599 at the breaking point and $499. Like, yeah, that's the old regime. Now it's changed, and that's for both PlayStation and Xbox. In my view, in my opinion, I see no real way that Sony is going to try to subsidize. Microsoft can afford to, but will they want to?
Nope.
Mind you, I believe this may be their last gen with their own box, right? And I say that because, as you were just mentioning, third-party OEMs probably will fill that space. And to argue about, like, well, it's not really an Xbox. Well, what do you value as an Xbox? Does it have the OS? Does it have everything available that you would get on a typical Xbox? Yeah, okay, then it's an Xbox. I wouldn't get hung up on that. And I think it's clear Microsoft is kind of moving us forward and moving gaming forward to a closer, I guess, a closer relationship to PC gaming, right? That's where to me, it seems where Sony and Microsoft are headed, especially Microsoft, especially with the shared storefronts being a part of the next gen Xbox. It shows that they're moving toward that end, right? So to that end, the rumors from people like Kepler L2, they're saying that it's going to be a very high performant Xbox.
Yes.
Modular, Windows OS, obviously, kind of hybrid PC. That's why I came up with the name, the Xbox Fusion, for the next Xbox. That's my name for it. I believe that might work out. We'll see.
I like it.
Thank you. I thought I was pretty clever for that. But so I feel like, with that being the case, rather, with it being such a high performing, SKU, I don't think that they're going to skimp out on quality for that. We've had Sarah Bond and everybody come out like, oh, it's going to be the most technically, what you said, the biggest tech leap we've ever had, et cetera, et cetera. I expect it to be costly, but reasonably costly, right? The problem is we do have the tariffs situation, so we don't know how that might affect things too. But I fully expect it to be in that 900 range, I would say. If I'm looking at the handheld, I would expect the console would have to be within that range. Same for Sony. So if anybody's on Sony's side thinking, oh, Sony will be cheaper, I think you all have to get out of that mindset of the traditional pricing range for what we're going to. Where we're going, I think it's kind of uncharted ground right now. I think they're going to a different way. And Microsoft has shown, by the way, I just want to throw this out there. Microsoft has shown ways to help ingratiate themselves to people who might not have that money up front. Remember, they had that leasing thing you could do where you can buy it.
And they may bring that back. That's a great point, dude. That's a phenomenal point. Yep.
Thank you. And I feel like that's one way they could go about doing it. Maybe start a pre I hate to say it this way, but a layaway plan, so to speak. I know people are probably like, oh, layaway. Yeah, we're not all rich, y'all. I'm sorry. It
They
is
have
what it
programs like Affirm, for instance, is one that
Yeah.
let you like take a 12-month
Yeah.
package, and you pay a couple of bucks a month. Like maybe if the console was $1,000, you probably wanted to paying like $100 a month, but $100 a month to get the console up front is not bad. And that's exactly the route that you're suggesting. And you know what? Xbox already did that, where they included 2 years of Game Pass in there as well. So,
and I would say since this is going to be more costly even than what they did with the Xbox Series X, obviously, started early, a year before the console comes out. That way people can be prepared. They can get enroll into it, pay it off by that point. I think that could work. I think Sony should do the same. And that would be a way to negate the thought of here's this money up front, especially in the economy we have going on right now. And it's likely to get worse. Yeah, if you want to, to make that easy for the consumer, I think that would be a smart way to do it. But I think we're moving toward a more PC hybrid centric kind of gen. I really do. I honestly believe it. I think everything will be heard about the next Xbox points directly to that, and Sony is not going to be far behind. So people need to understand that. I don't know if they'll have the storefronts on it. I wouldn't doubt that they would. I'm pretty sure they will, right? They might just have the storefronts too. But Sony is less dependent on the storefronts than Microsoft, obviously, because there's been games that will skip the platform, right? But so now that won't be a case. Now that we'll give on Xbox, you get
every
everything.
Game will be on Xbox one way or another, whether it's through Xbox or Steam.
Yeah, and now there's been rumors again that Kepler L2 guy suggested, and I don't believe this one bit, because I remember some of our Hoove brothers who were like, "Oh, well, the PS5 Pro is the equivalent of a 4090." It's like, what world are you in right now? And
just ask a Snake Eater, Metal Gear Solid remake.
All right. And other games, right?
Yeah.
So the claim is the performance could be comparable to a RTX 5080. I don't believe that one bit. 5080 is a monster, and I just don't see it. And the PS6, excuse me, is rumored to be like a 9070 XT, I guess XTX or whatever. No, I just don't see that being the case. But it's going to be costly. I just don't think they're going to subsidize the cost of these next gen consoles. So I would say maybe start getting some money put aside, and I would hope that Microsoft and Sony both kind of again start some type of payment plan where people can pay into it, a month or whatever, and get it paid off by the time those consoles launch. I think that would be one of the smartest things. Everybody could possibly do that. You have much more of a reach of people that could pay into something to pay it off versus having up cash up front.
Or trading in your old stuff and see whether or not GameStop is even around at that point. It's going to be very interesting to see. But you know what's even more interesting than that, right? Is some of the stuff that came out in the last week or so. So, Jamie, I want to bring you in because there was a running rumor that the PlayStation 6 is going to have 3 SKUs potentially, right? There is the PlayStation 6 monster console. There is an S version of the PlayStation 6, which the Series S was panned and continues to get panned by the PlayStation community, but Sony's doing it, so thumbs up, right? And a rumored new handheld. Again, folks, these are all rumors. So 3 SKUs, not 2, but 3. Now, Xbox, on the other hand, is expected in 2027 to have a box under the TV, which could cost upwards of $900. And again, folks, rumors, a dockable handheld, which was going to be their S version, something that Sony is going to be copying like they've copied many times before. Folks, there is a reason why both of these companies are looking to bring in an S version of their new tech. Why? Because the new tech is going to cost a lot of money. And again, how much? I mean, it's an opinion, folks. We all on this panel think, Jamie, that the next Xbox, the next PlayStation is probably going to cost $800 at minimum. It might even be more. Shout out to Eris _EMS. He said in the chat earlier that considering that that some of the chipsets are $1,000 right now. If you want to buy a really good video card, it's $1,000 just for the card. A $900 box is not a bad price. It's not priced bad, and he's not wrong. I want to get your thoughts on the potential of the next Xbox being twice as much as the next PlayStation 6. Again, just so ridiculous. And again, this is a perfect example of misinformation and sensational journalism at its absolute finest. Let's get your thoughts, man.
You know, I absolutely love how journalists and, you know, other people that cover game and like talk about this topic. So they'll say, like, you know, the next gen Xbox is going to be twice the price of the next gen, you know, PlayStation 6. But the PlayStation 6 is going to be super powerful. It's going to be able to power a holodeck. It also has a handheld mode, but it only costs, you know, the price of a bag of oranges and a kiss on the cheek. Right? That's what we hear all the time. And for people in chat, I'm not being literal. Look, I think it's a messy situation because, yeah, I had to. I think, you know, it's a messy situation because we're in a generation where, you know, Microsoft, they have the Series S out. It's a cheaper console. You know, it's going to be the cheapest way to play a GTA. And by the way, every time I mention that, people always reply saying, but I don't want the cheapest way. Well, because I'm not bloody talking to you. But my point is, this generation, the console prices have gone up. And, you know, people will say it's just the tariffs thing. If anyone ever randomly hears like a screeching noise in the middle of the night, that's my eyeballs rolling to the back of my head. Because twice this generation, we've had consoles go up in price, right?
Yes.
The PlayStation 5 went up in the UK and Europe in 2021. It wasn't about tariffs. It's about profit, right?
A year later after launch, dude.
Yeah, a year later. And then Microsoft did later, and then Sony did again, and then Microsoft did again, right? They've both done it twice, right? It has absolutely nothing to do with tariffs. These consoles cost a lot of money. And, you know, back in my day, when you bought a 360 at launch, 2 years later, you could get one for like half the price. Half, right? And we haven't had that this generation, you know? Like, I can't remember any other point in time where, oh yeah, hardware goes up in price. That makes no sense, right? So like, you know, could I say Sony doing the cheaper console? Yeah, because like it's going to be the cheapest entry point, right? Why not? You know, I've never really had a problem with the Series S. You know, these games, these engines, they can scale, right? You have some developers that they still making games that are optimized for like, you know, 1080 graphics cards, right? I don't even know when that came out. It's like a decade ago or something. But like, there's games that still work on those graphics cards and they look and perform well. Well, we're going to have that with consoles, right? You're going to have the detractors that are like, you know, oh, it's going to hold back gaming. No, it's not. It really isn't. Like, you know, if you have Black Myth Wukong that can run at 60 frames per second on a Series S, I think we can all calm down for a second. You know, like, I think it's okay, you know, but going with potentially 3 pieces of hardware, I mean, we'll have to see. But like, my theory for Microsoft, this might be controversial. My theory for Microsoft next gen is that they aren't doing a traditional Series S style box. I think, and I still think this, I think they're going to release a main, you know, console powerhouse, and then they're going to release their own, you know, first party handheld. And that will obviously dock and be their quote unquote cheaper or like smaller box, right? Sony doing 3, I can see that happening, you know.
Yep.
Like, I've just seen a couple of minutes ago, Sony just announced PC drivers for their accessories, right? So you can use the, you know, the wireless earbuds and the headset on PC now with official drivers, right? I think that, you know, Sony, more than anyone, I think they are willing to experiment with like different form factors now, because like, look, if you had asked me 10 years ago, who's going to enter the handheld market, I would just say Nintendo, right?
Yeah.
I think most people would just say just Nintendo. But then the Steam Deck came out and proved everyone wrong, right? A lot of people are interested in handheld gaming. That's why you have all these different PC manufacturers making their own thing. And, you know, Microsoft, they're going to, I 100% think they're still going to do their own thing. And Sony, they've seen that these things are selling. People like the fact that they're going to be able to take their games on the go. And look, if you're Sony, do you want someone that's buying a Switch so they can play, whatever game on the go, or do you want them to buy your Sony handheld to play games on the go which you buy from their store? That's the way I see it. But doing the cheaper, console, it really makes sense because, like, look, I think it's disgusting. Maybe because I'm stuck in the past, but I think it's disgusting that we talked about next gen console prices and it being like $899. I'm not saying that's not what it's going to be. I do think it'll be in that ballpark, but I think that's bloody ridiculous. Like, I think this time, like, a lot of people have next to no money. People are still making memes about the price of eggs. Hell, butter in my local Sainsbury's has security tags.
Come on.
Yeah. So normally, like things like wine and whiskey have the security tags.
Yeah.
Butter, because it's one of the most expensive things in the shop.
Wow.
Yeah. Lurpak butter. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, right? Everything's falling apart. The society's falling apart. Maybe it's because I watched The Big Short the other night and I feel like I know a lot about the economy. And I'm making myself sound smarter than I actually am. But Microsoft and Sony, they like money. They're going to charge us way more. They're going to give us different form factor options because, look, if you're a PC gamer, you have a bloody wide range of graphics cards to choose from, right? You have really super expensive ones and you have more affordable ones, right? And if you're on PC, take your bloody pick. It's up to you. On console, like if you're a Microsoft gamer or an Xbox gamer, in the past you've had one box to choose from. If you're Sony, one box to choose from. So, same with Nintendo. I think these companies are realizing, like, wow, we are actually going to charge a lot for these next gen consoles. So maybe we will actually have to give them a cheap option. And yeah, you're going to have some backlash in the, fanboy community for a month or two, but people get over it, right? It is what it is. But like, look, for me, I will always be like the console preference guy, right? I prefer Xbox, I prefer consoles, and like a handheld, a first party handheld does interest me. A smaller console doesn't really interest me that much, but there's a huge market for it. Like, hell, when Football Manager came to Xbox, that was basically paired with an Xbox Series S in the UK and a lot of places, right? Because that was a thing that was selling at the time. A lot of people love playing that game on that console. And, there's a lot of avenues for people to play these cheaper games. Like, look, if you play, let's say, free-to-play games, these black hole games, the cheapest console is going to be the Series S at the minute, right? I know there's a lot of people that they buy a Series S and they just play Warzone on it.
Yep.
Right? And, that'll be the same with PlayStation whenever they come out with a cheaper console. It just is what it is. I think the gaming space is evolving, it's changing, and especially console players, we kind of have to just, go with the motions and just deal with it. Personally, I think it's interesting that we're going to have multiple different form factors, but you're having these people, especially, journalists, I'm doing air quotes, coming out and saying, like, just outright that the Xbox is going to be twice the price based on absolutely nothing. Right?
Yeah, ridiculous.
They can talk about how it's all about licenses and, like, having all these different storefronts. But one, we factually do not know if Microsoft's doing the multiple storefront. They've talked about it tons of times. They've implied, but you're having a journalist come out there and say that the price is going to be double, stating it as a fact, right? That it's going to be double the price because of the storefront. Like, no, it's stupid. Right, but we are in that time of year where clickbait is going to get wild. Every time there's new hardware around the corner, and it's crazy to say that there's new hardware around the corner, because this generation's been bloody weird. I think that people have to just like take a step back and realize these people are clowns, right? They don't know what they're talking about. I've seen people say that the PlayStation 5 Pro was going to be as powerful as a 5080.
Yeah,
right?
Ridiculous.
These people that have a lot of followers, a lot of people pay attention to them, and what came out? Absolutely nothing. Nowhere near that power. It's sad. It's a sad state of affairs that we have these, game journalists. They report rumors as facts, and they don't really label it as such. It's sad, but no, I don't think Microsoft's next console will be twice the price. But I do think Sony would possibly do 3 different pieces of hardware because they've kind of done it in the past. Like last generation, they were concurrently selling the PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 4 Slim, and the PlayStation 4 Pro as well as a VR headset. So I don't think they have a problem with trying to sell multiple pieces of hardware, but that's just my take.